Hey everybody, Matt here. Thanks for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to continue to look at SketchUp free. Well, welcome back. This is now part 9 of the SketchUp free video tutorial series that I've been working on. If you're new to SketchUp or new to 3D modeling, I invite you to check the earlier videos because this video is going to pick up where the last one left off. So at the end of part 8, I showed you how I actually modified my model here to make more distance between the legs to accommodate a wider tabletop, which I now need to edit so that there's enough room for the blade runner to rotate between the legs of the table and not hit anything. So this video, I'm going to show you how I actually modify the tabletop to accommodate the legs that are now wider, more distance between them. So first thing I'm going to do is move the whole tabletop subassembly away from the legs so that I can work on the table assembly without the interference of the legs. So once again, I'm just moving the whole group. I like to move it on axis. Happen to be moving on the green axis. Left mouse click to position it, and left mouse click to deselect the group. And now what I'll do this time is I'll select this and I'll hide it, just so it's kind of out of the way. Okay, so there's our group, and so what I want to do is I want to edit the group, and I want to start by hiding the boxes. So left clicking the top boxes that represent the router table, and I'm going to click on hide, and then I'm going to click on the bottom box. Let's see, looks like this spacer block is its own entity separate from this. So let's go ahead and add the spacer block to the group where these boxes are. So let's rotate the whole thing around. Okay, so now I'm actually upside down. Okay, I've got the Blade Runner box highlighted. I'm hold down the left shift key on the keyboard, click on that face, that face, that face. I have to click on each face independently, because when I created the spacer block, I did not save it as its own group. So now I'm clicking on all the faces that make the spacer block, at least the faces that I can see, and I can tell that they're selected because the edges are, well, the edges aren't actually highlighted, but the faces are highlighted kind of with these dots. So now if I right click and say make group, now the white box, the tan box, and now the gray spacer block are all in their own group, and you can see that they occupy the entire width of the table. So we have to make the table wider. So I'm going to hide those boxes. And what's interesting is that these are two faces of the spacer block that I couldn't reach from the outside. So I'm just going to click on this and say hide. Click on these edges, holding down the shift key so I can get all 4 of them highlighted. click hide. Now you click on this face, left shift key down to choose the edges of this face. This is a consequence of not making the spacer block its own group. So I kind of broke my own rule there. Okay, so I'm going to hide that. So now I'm left only with the tabletop, and you can see that I'm in edit group because these dashed lines outline the volume of space that this group that I'm editing occupy. Okay, so what I want to do actually is just like in the earlier video, I want to move this face of the top piece of plywood along the red axis in this direction 1 inch. So if I click on this, so I had to go one more level deep in edit group. Now if I click edit group again, so now I'm actually editing the group that contains the piece of plywood that's making the top. Well, I guess it's the bottom because the whole thing is turned upside down now. So if I zoom in, I can see that I'm highlighting that face, left mouse click, start sliding along the red axis, and I type in the number 1 and press enter. Okay, so now it moved that face out 1 inch. It's also saving my model, so it won't let me do anything. Okay, so now it's done saving. So I moved that part, that piece of the plywood out 1 inch. So now I want to do the same thing on this part of the plywood. So I just left mouse click it to select it, use the push pull tool, type in 1, and there the face is moved out 1 inch. So that's what it looks like so far. So I want to do exactly the same thing on this piece of plywood. So if I select it, it's its own group, right click, say edit group. Now if I use the push pull tool, I can highlight this face, start pulling it out along the red axis, type 1, press enter, and now I've got that face out 1 inch. Do the same thing on this side. Okay, so now the actual plywood is 1 inch wider on each side, which is what I want. Now I need to move these 2x4 rails out to the corners of the widened plywood, and then I'm going to have to make the inside pieces a little bit longer. So I'm going to do that by rotating around, click on the group, I'm going to say edit group, I'm going to click on the top piece of plywood, and I'm going to say hide. So now I'm exposing the rails, 2 side rails and then the in-between spacers. This big X here, these are more like construction lines. I used those when I was positioning the boxes in the center of the table. Okay, so now I'm just going to highlight these lines, select them rather, and then choose hide. Okay, so now I want to move this 2x4, which does not appear to be its own group. So we have to fix that. So in order to fix that, I want to hide this piece of plywood as well, so that I can get to all 4 sides of this 2x4, which is what I couldn't do when I hid the Blade Runner spacer block just a few minutes ago. So let's choose this face, left shift key down, this face. So all of the faces that make this object, I need to now highlight, because what I want to do is put them all in the same group so that I can move the whole group as a unit Okay, so now I have another problem. So I have something on the bottom. So let me hide those items and start again. So what I want to do is highlight all the faces in this 2x4 so I can make it a group. And again, this is a consequence of not making the 2x4 a group when I started. So that was a mistake on my part. But it's okay, it can be corrected, and I'm actually showing you how to correct it. So I believe I have all the faces of the 2x4 highlighted now, or selected, because all the faces have these little dots on them. So now I want to right click and say make group. Okay, and I need to do the same exact thing on this side. You just want to highlight the faces. I don't want to highlight the edges. When I'm orbiting, I'm actually releasing the shift button on the keyboard. Now I press the shift key, the left shift key down on my keyboard, and now I'm left mouse clicking to add these faces to the collection of faces I've already selected. So I think I have them, there's one, left shift key. Okay, so that one's added to the collection. So I think I have all of the faces selected. So I want to make that a group. Okay. Now, before I move these 2x4s, I also want to add to the group this axle. And you can see now that what I wound up doing was modeling a short piece of the axle on this side and another short piece on this side, but they're all on the same center. So when I move this 2x4, I want to move the 2x4 and the axle. So I want to add the axle to this group. So the 2x4 group I just created. So shift key on the keyboard, the left one, and I click on the round face and then the end of the axle. So that's highlighted. Now if I right mouse click, and click on make group, now the axle is part of the 2x4 group, which is what I want. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing on this side. Shift key down, left mouse click. Now because I have these crosshairs in the face that makes the end of the axle, I have to select each quarter of the face of the axle, which I just did. So now we're going to say make group. Okay. So now we're ready to move the 2x4s. There's an extra line, probably a construction line made at some point or other. So I'm just going to highlight it and choose hide. Now if I select or enable the hidden objects, I want to click on this whole collection and say, well, let's see, say edit group, click on the hidden piece of plywood, right click, choose unhide. This piece of plywood, right click, choose unhide. Then I'm going to turn off the hidden objects, and there are my two pieces of plywood back on the table. Okay, so what I want to do is move this 2x4 group out to the edge of the widened piece of plywood. So there we go. So that one's moved. Oops. Highlight that group. Move that one out. Okay, and you can see the axle came with it, which is great. Now if I hide the top plywood, what you'll see is that this piece right here, which is also not its own group, is actually too short. For right now, I'm not going to worry about it because it's hidden by the plywood. And I can also, when I go to make my printouts, I can use the tape measure and measure that this piece needs to be 1 foot 7 inches long, so it's at 19 inches long. So I don't need to spend the time and energy to correct the model here. I know that when I go to cut the 2x4s, they need to be 19 inches long. So I will unhide the piece of plywood. I'll also unhide the boxes. So there's my wider tabletop. Now, to accommodate the Blade Runner, which is this tan box. So let's flip the whole thing right side up again. And we're going to let's see, it's the easiest way to do this. Oops. Let me hide this. So I can rotate around, choose that group and say, oops, say unhide. So there are my legs. I'm going to choose this group, choose unhide. And now I'm going to turn off hidden objects. And now the moment of truth. If I've done everything correctly, I should be able to move my tabletop back into position. Okay. So now I think you can see that as the tabletop rotates around, there's a gap between the legs, and now I'm good to go. So that corrected that problem. So I'm going to leave it at this point for this video. So I hope that gives you some insights on my thought process, how I design the models, how I edit them, how I move pieces to look for problems, how I correct problems, and so on. So, as always, thanks for watching.